This week's Two Truths and a Lie. I'm here with Tom Chernaik, who is our guest today. Greg Narain is traveling. Looking forward to digging into some FTC disclosure issues with Tom. I've known Tom for a number of years, and we've worked together on this FTC disclosure for at least 8 or 9 years. And I'm glad to have you here with me, Tom, even though I had to handle and struggle the vagaries of downtown Manhattan. I do not get along well with this area. To get here, we're in Tom's offices in the Verizon building downtown on West Street in New York City. So this is not only a Facebook Live, but it's live and in person with a guest. Welcome to Two Truths and a Lie, which is also broadcast. It's broadcast live on Facebook, and we also show up on LinkedIn as Alpha Thoughts. Tom, hello.
Hi. Great to see you.
Tell the world a little bit about you.
So I'm trained as a lawyer, but I've worked as a marketer for many years. I started a company a few years ago when the FTC announced that they were going to require people to add legal language and disclosure information.
Oh, shit.
Uh-oh. We may not be on the microphone. Hold on.
Now we're on the microphone. See.
Hopefully you're hearing us.
This
now.
is what happens when you don't do things in any kind of great order. So this is why it's live. I just got this microphone and I forgot to plug it in. So we'll start all over again. I'm Susan Getgood. I'm here with Two Truths and a Lie. This is the vagaries of live television when you forget to plug in your equipment. So I'm here with Tom Chernaik, who is the CEO of CMPLY, who I've known for a number of years. Greg Narain is traveling today, so he will not be with us. We're gonna dig into some, you could hear, hi Anna. Hopefully you can hear better now that we have the microphone. And we will dig into some FTC disclosure issues. The format of the show, as you know, is Two Truths and a Lie, or a myth more likely. So the first thing I'm going to ask Tom is to tell us two truths and a lie about himself.
Okay, I'll start with, I've actually lived within an 8-block radius my entire life on the island of Manhattan. It's one. Another is that my favorite hobby is skydiving. I love to do it whenever I can and whenever I'm not in the office. And the third is that I am a distant relative of a president, of actually the 10th president of the United States, John Tyler. So those are my two truths and a lie.
Awesome. So at the end of the show, we'll reveal which one was the lie so that you have a reason for hanging around. I hope you all have a reason for hanging around anyway. So first off, I think the biggest myth, and for those of you, watching this, probably you're all very familiar with the FTC disclosure requirements that basically require advertisers to provide a disclosure when any advertising materials don't look like advertising. If it's a sponsored post, if it's a video, if it's something that you're chatting up someone at a bar, anytime it doesn't look like or feel like real advertising, you have to disclose that you're being compensated for the work that you do. It's really pretty simple. But there are a lot of myths that have come up about FTC disclosure. And I think the first one, and the one that probably gets me the most, is this statement on a regular basis that there are exceptions, that you don't have to disclose everything. And that's not true. So, Tom, thoughts?
Yeah, I think the one that bothers me the most is that people have always assumed that there's a celebrity exemption, and there isn't actually a celebrity exemption. People have, in traditional terms, there was a concept that, if somebody was, featured in an ad, you didn't necessarily have to disclose that they were paid, because you would be walking through an airport, you would see a big billboard ad with a celebrity on it. You understood that Tiger Woods wasn't just on that picture for his own well-being, that he was actually paid by Accenture to be featured, on this billboard. People assume that concept just traveled through to social media and to other types of media, and it doesn't. There hasn't been a large celebrity case yet, and there's a number of reasons that hasn't happened. But that's not to say that there's any kind of a celebrity exemption. In fact, the FTC has reinforced that there isn't a celebrity exemption in that regard.
No, I think that's a really important point, that it has to be, if someone is conversing on social media used by a celebrity looks no different than social media when it's used by a regular person. So to some degree, they are acting in their capacity as a regular person, so you can't tell the difference. It doesn't look the same as in an advertising or when you see them with the cap in Wimbledon or whatever else it might be. I mean, there are some exceptions in media that have to do with websites that are clearly review sites, for example. I mean, or sites that are obviously full of and only exist and the only purpose thereof is advertising. But that's not true of Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or Pinterest or any platform where you might be using your social accounts. And it's indistinguishable whether you are a celebrity or a regular person. It's indistinguishable whether you're doing it for payment or not payment unless you actually disclose it. I think the other myth that continues to surface, and I don't know, two of them actually, that continues to surface that also, gets me is that being able to say, thanks brand is sufficient of a disclosure. And it's not, because it doesn't actually make it clear that there was any kind of advertising or compensation relationship. I'm drinking a Poland Spring water, and I could easily say, thanks Poland Spring for, making it so that I'm not so hot and sweaty right now. But the fact of the matter is that I bought this bottle of water. I did not get it for free from Poland Spring.
I meant to provide CRMS, but I didn't have enough time beforehand. So. The other one that tends to come up a lot that is just a myth that needs to be dispelled is that if a program isn't paid, then people think that they don't need to disclose. But the FTC doesn't distinguish a payment as the trigger. It's if somebody's part of a marketing program, that is when they then need to, and if it's something that would come as a surprise to someone who's watching, that's when it becomes a need to disclose. And I think the area, and this has changed over time. It started, originally on blogs and then moved to Twitter and then moved to Facebook. And I think now we're seeing the very worst of it is largely on Instagram, where people are, sharing products, sharing pictures of things, and there's no attempt whatsoever to make disclosure. And a lot of the recent cases that have been brought forward have revolved around the use of Instagram, and there's been talk of Snapchat as well. But these more visual platforms make it much more challenging than the traditional blog post or social media post or even short video.
Right. If you don't have a way how do you put the disclosure on if it's a picture, and how do you make sure that the disclosure stays with the picture no matter where it goes? I mean, there's a lot of situations. Well, I mean, I think you get to an important point, which is, and this is actually one of my truths about disclosure. It's actually not that difficult, and it's not complicated. It's a relatively simple matrix, and the FTC deliberately makes it a simple set of requirements. They don't tell you how to do it. But if there's compensation involved, whether it's a free product or you're paid for your post or you work for the company that you're talking about, because you are in fact compensated by your employer. If there's compensation involved, and if there is an endorsement of something, if you say something about a brand and you were compensated for it, you must disclose. If you're an employee, you need to disclose you were an employee. If you got a free product, you need to disclose that you got a free product.
Or they paid for your travel,
or they paid for your
conference ticket.
Whatever it happened to be that you were compensated with, so compensation doesn't happen. But that's it. It's really literally that simple. And I think a lot of the discussion about how it's confusing and difficult and challenging and hard and all that is because people wish it were confusing and difficult and hard, because there's a perception that if you don't disclose, people are more likely to read your content. And that's potentially true, but that's on us to make better content, not to not disclose sponsored content. And I think that's an important distinction, just because we think that, people think it's organic, whatever that means. And in my world, organic is just as likely to be the organic material that my dog left in the yard as it is anything else, right? Organic doesn't necessarily mean it's a positive statement. So I think that's my first truth. It's really not that hard to disclose. It's just that we make it harder.
And I think that on the influencer side of it, adding a disclosure, making sure that it's integrated into your material, is relatively easy and straightforward. Where it does get a little bit more complicated is for the brand itself or for the agency that's representing a brand to actually be able to then monitor, not just for the inclusion of a disclosure, but to be able to monitor for the omission of a disclosure when it's required. And that's definitely been a challenge in the space. It's one that the FTC continues to call out.
What are some of the other truths that I think we wanted to talk about? I'm just going through, looking for my notes on my phone.
I mean, I think that in general, the community overall is aware of disclosure needs, and I think there needs to be continued education on how it applies and how you can do it and what true best practices are. But I think that what we're seeing is in general, there's still a real gap and a real lack of disclosure that's going on, in particular in some of the newer platforms. I think the traditional blog space was was sort of where this was first waged as a battle, and I think people became very aware of it, and people integrated into their blog sites and within their blogs and within their posts. I think as we go further and further out into the newer platforms, I think it's been more challenging for people to really understand that they are in fact required to do this and how they should be doing it.
And again, back to sort of the truth is, well, as Tom says, the truth is, while things are getting better, it's not perfect yet, and it probably never will be, right? There's always going to be someone new who either doesn't get it or doesn't want to get it. But I think that if you think about the real underlying reason and you associate yourself with it, which is if you are the person being spoken to, don't you want to know if there is an advertising relationship with the person who's making that endorsement? We all would like to know that the person telling us to go to that hotel or to buy that thing or to how great that product was, or in the case of mine, and by the way, I am not endorsed by Sierra Mist. I have no relationship whatsoever. I happen to like it. But you want to know that that people either have a relationship or don't have a relationship. And I think as many issues have come up because employees are talking about stuff, or people are, with companies talking about things and not disclosing, and that'll continue to be a problem unless we sort of get back to the things. It's that simple, that if you're compensated, all you have to do is disclose that you have a relationship. Confusion, you don't have to tell people how much you were paid, or even if you were paid, just that you have a relationship is the key thing.
And I think a simple test and a simple way to think about it is, would somebody who comes in and watches this, if your grandmother started watching this post, or if somebody interacted with this message, didn't necessarily know what your relationship was, would it be clear to them that you have a relationship there or what that relationship is if they just stumbled across it? And I think thinking of somebody who's non-technical, like a grandmother, helps. It's would she understand in looking at this that in fact you were part of a program, and that's why you're making a review or creating an endorsement around a product.
I think the other thing that's important to note, and this is sort of quasi-myth, quasi-truth, is the myth part of it, or the lie, is the FTC guidelines tell you exactly how to disclose, and they don't. So, when someone says
even when they clarify.
Well, they clarify
yes.
by exception, right? They say this wasn't any good.
Right.
They don't actually tell you what to do. They tell you what not to do. And it continues to be we don't like this, we don't like this, we don't like this. And that's like any legal situation. You can find out the parameters by virtue of the case law, right? I mean, it's not a law, it's a regulation, but it's the same kind of principle in that people are accused or have done something incorrectly, and the FTC will say, this was not correct, and this is why. We don't like the hashtag spawn because, I always think it reminds me of salmon going upstream. We don't like the hashtag call out. We don't like anything that isn't clear. And I think that it has to be clear. So the FTC guidelines don't tell you how to disclose. So if anyone sort of says, this is the FTC approved disclosure, look at it 3 times and twice on Sunday, because it probably is, it may not even be the right kind of disclosure, that someone may be using the FTC approved this as a label. So, look at it and just always think about it in terms of if it were you, would you want to know? And is the disclosure clear and easy to understand? Is it near the endorsement? And is it with the endorsement in all its forms? And I think that's where the visual platforms like video and Snapchat have been, and Instagram have been somewhat difficult because photos might be sponsored photos, but the disclosure isn't in the photo.
Yeah.
Or it often isn't in the video. I remember I had a whole situation a few years ago where I had to sort of clarify for everyone, no, you actually have to put the disclosure in the video, because
that is what the FTC has suggested as well.
And so that's those are our sort of 2 truths and a lie, or 2 myths and a lie about social media disclosure in the FTC guidelines. The myth is that there's a standard single way to disclose, and that everybody doesn't have to do it. Neither of those things are true. There is no one way that's the right way to disclose. You can do it with a hashtag. You can do it with natural language. You can do it with a piece of text on a blog post. But it has to be with the blog post. It has to be easy to find, easy to see, and easy to understand.
And I think important to keep in mind is also that content gets syndicated. You may post it on one platform, but it gets reposted and promoted on others. You want to make sure that that disclosure is going along with it.
And then the truth that we were talking about is the fact it's really not that hard. It's actually fairly easy. You can do it by simply saying, you are hosted by a hotel. I was so pleased to be hosted as the guest of the Marriott and enjoy the facilities for a week with my family. That sounds pretty clear to me that you were hosted. And then if you want to be doubly clear, you put hashtag paid or hashtag sponsored at the end of your post or on your tweets or on your Facebook posts. And the last thing is that free product absolutely counts. If you get free product, if you're an employee, if you work for the agency for a brand and you're promoting the brand, you need to be clear about your relationship with the brand.
And I think one other thing that came up a lot more when this was very focused on Twitter, but people were putting just in their Twitter bios, they were putting in a disclosure there. The FTC has said that that's not enough. I think that's kind of fading out because the newer platforms don't really have that same kind of bio that goes along with people. But if you're thinking about it that way, that's actually not a way to make a disclosure. It's helpful, and it's helpful to say, for example, in a bio, like, I work for an agency, I represent lots of brands, I do things like that. That's certainly a helpful thing to do, but it is not sufficient as a disclosure in and of itself.
Absolutely. I think that the best path really is to disclose in natural language to the best of your ability, but to understand that people don't always understand what we've said or written or wrote, and that a hashtag or a clear statement. So if you write a post and you include something that makes it clear that this was sponsored content in the writing, but then you have a line that this post was sponsored by so-and-so, you've made it abundantly clear that this was a piece of sponsored content. Likewise, if you're writing a tweet or doing an Instagram post and you have a great piece of content, use the language of your tweet, use the language of your Instagram post to be clear and include something to the effect of, validating your sponsor. But a hashtag is completely and totally understandable. When someone sees hashtag ad, they're going to understand it. Now, does that mean that they might be less likely to engage with it? I hope not. I hope that the content starts to be good enough that people understand that it doesn't need to be a barrier. But it doesn't matter, honestly, if the engagement is a little slightly less if it's an ad, because you still have to do it. And I think that's the summary of it. And I want to keep to our normal time of about 20 minutes. So, Tom, what was the lie? The
lie was skydiving. I do not skydive.
You do not?
I'd love to. I'd love to try it. I've meant to, but I haven't done that. But I have actually lived in an 8-block radius my whole life, and I am actually related to a president who in past times was considered one of the most unpopular presidents, but that's changed in recent years.
Which president was it?
John Tyler, 10th president.
Wow, that goes way back.
Way back.
All right, thank you, folks, those of you who joined us live, and for those of you watching later on, have a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.